5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses for being here today. These are some fascinating subjects, and I'm struggling a little bit on which one to address here. We've got land use and a clean environment. We've got the law of conservation of mass and energy conservation or net energy gain or the carbon cycle and economics of real versus inflationary food cost. These are all things that I like to talk about, but let's start off with the carbon cycle and land use. And Dr. DeCicco, if I understand your argument that and getting back to the law of conservation of mass and energy, there's only so much carbon in the world, and the question is, where's that carbon going to be located? It's either going to be in the atmosphere, or it's going to be sequestered somewhere under the ground or in biomass here on the Earth. And if we create a new crop source to make ethanol or corn, then you're going to be clearing more land to produce this corn. So you're changing land use and putting a crop there that's going to be planted and harvested every year. I remember being at a conference on renewable energy where they were showing in South America where they had cleared this highly productive land to grow, I don't remember if it was sugar beets or corn, but in the photo there was timber from a rainforest stacked up in a perimeter around the land. It was used to keep animals out of the crop. But as we look at that, something we haven't talked about is the energy gain from corn ethanol. And the research that I've looked at shows it's somewhere between 1 to 1.3, maybe as high as 1.6 on the energy put into producing corn ethanol versus the energy that you get out. We've been talking more about the carbon balance on it. But if we look at other forms of cellulosic ethanol or biomass, even though the processes haven't been refined, the numbers on the net energy gain are much higher than what we see on corn ethanol. So are you saying we should totally abandon all renewable fuels, or is there room for more research to develop some of these cellulosic ethanol technologies, maybe from woody biomass, that do have even a better carbon cycle effect?
Sure. I take issue with the mandating of the fuels from an environmental point of view. I think it's important to support the research. So in other words, as I've pointed out, there is a potential, if it's done right, if technology materializes in an economically viable way at commercial scale for forms of cellulosic production, in a way that has failed to materialize for nearly 40 years now. I mean, this is not a new area of research. Then that could be a good thing, provided the land use is properly managed and that there are guarantees that the actual production of whatever biomass is going to be going into the cellulosic fuel is done in such a way that it increases the rate at which carbon is removed from the atmosphere without depriving the food and feed system of carbon. So there's two big ifs that have not been met, are not, in my estimation, close to being met for the commercial viability of so-called advanced biofuels. So yes, in terms of this committee's role advising the research programs, we should continue research in this area and maybe make progress through that. But when it comes to intervening in the marketplace and trying to force fuels in that are not commercially viable, that have a dubious carbon pedigree anyway because the analyses backing them were done incorrectly, I think that is very questionable to do that.
If we look at our forest across the country right now, we see hundreds of millions of tons of carbon going up in smoke every year from forests that are mismanaged. And if that carbon were captured and used for energy, it seems to me like there would be a net benefit from energy and the carbon cycle to do that.
That's correct. I mean, that's an example where if you're capturing carbon, harvesting carbon, say from forest residues that are at risk of causing a fire and burning up anyway, or corn stover to the extent you can do that without overly degrading your soils, that would decay anyway, release its carbon. Those are examples of what I mean by additional carbon. You're getting additional carbon because you're taking carbon that otherwise would either burn or decay without being put to commercial use. So those are potentially legitimate sources of carbon, but I don't think that then justifies some kind of mandatory use. I think you need to look at that situation carefully, and then I would go back to we need to have the right market signals here involved, and that's not something you get through a technology winner picking mandate.
And I think I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but if you'll oblige me just a few minutes, or we're going to get a second round of questions.
I'll give you another minute.
All right, thank you. So as we look at where we're at on cellulosic fuels, it seems to me it would make sense that while conventional energy prices are low, that we've put more money into research to make these cellulosic fuels competitive in a free market, so that when conventional fuel costs go up, we could use these renewable fuels in a market-based economy, so that we're not subsidizing or mandating the use of them. But we just don't have the technology yet to make them cost effectively to do that. Would you agree with that? Mr. Coleman, your finger's on the button.
Yeah, that's the industry I represent. And so, I think I've made myself clear on this whole idea of a price-driven marketplace that we don't have. If you look at the history of ethanol use in this country, about 90% of the last 10 years, ethanol has been vastly cheaper than gasoline, and the oil industry hasn't used more than it has been required by the government to use. If we had a price-driven marketplace, we would already have the things that we're talking about wanting now: consumer choice at the pump, an alternative to gasoline, hedges against pump price spikes associated with petroleum, et cetera. The second thing I would take issue with is this cost component of cellulosic. If you look at how much, we're at the end of the era of light sweet crude that just squirts out of the ground. We are at the deep water, fracking, tight oil part of the evolution of crude oil that is infinitely more expensive than light sweet crude. And if you look at the costs of cellulosic biofuel versus the marginal oil gallon, such as the money that was spent in the Bakken, we are cost competitive with those oil plays. And so what we need to drive competition in the marketplace is access to the marketplace that we are not going to get unless we have either the RFS or we break up the oil companies, which I don't think is very politically popular.
Yeah, and most consumers, I think, care about what the price is on the gas pump. However, it gets there. Mr. Drevna, would you like to address that?
I don't know where to start. I just can't believe what I just heard in this hearing room. First of all, there's still, as the doctor said at the end of the table said, there's still a 10% maximum blend wall you can't meet. And that automobile or that lawnmower or that chainsaw doesn't give anything about where that ethanol comes from, whether it's cellulosic or whether it's corn or whether it's some still in West Virginia. It's ethanol. And we have a blend wall. Even EPA, who I very rarely agree with, says there's a blend wall problem, and it will be for the distant future. Number two, Mr. Coleman keeps on talking about this grand conspiracy of the big oil trying to stop penetration into the market. Well, I mean, the reality of the situation is big oil, little oil, independent refiner in the middle of the Corn Belt. They do not control anything to do with the market. 95% of the retail market is controlled by independent operators, just as my colleague down here, Mr. Anderson, is an independent operator for a franchise. It's the same thing. if those franchisees want to sell more ethanol or want to put in E85 pumps, have at it. If my friends from the advanced biofuel or the corn ethanol folks want to invest rather than sup at the government trough year in and year out, they can put the money. They can talk to the owners of the gas stations and say, hey, we're going to invest with you because it's got to be, it's not oil versus advanced versus this, it's what the consumer wants.
I would like to say how much I've enjoyed this exchange between Mr. Coleman and Mr. Drevna, but in the interest of the folks on the committee, we're going to go to our next questioner.
Thank you for that extended minute, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, you bet.